Number 1.
So, luckily, this story doesn't involve me being chased, almost kidnapped, stalked, etc. But it's one of the strangest and scariest things that has ever happened to me. I think about whatever happened that night from time to time, and sometimes I feel as though maybe I'm overreacting. But then I remember how I felt like my stomach was in my throat and my heart was going to burst out of my chest, and I know that my fear was justified. I never told my parents or the parents of the kids I was babysitting, which, looking back, was probably really stupid. This happened when I was 14 years old. I had just started babysitting for this family in my neighborhood. They had 2 kids, a boy who was at the time 10 and a girl who at the time was 8. They were great kids to babysit. They got along with each other without fighting and always did what I asked of them to do without complaining. Before I launch into what happened, I'm going to give you a little background information about this family's house so that you can understand why I was so freaked out. The house is situated pretty far back in my neighborhood on this little side street off of the main road that runs through the neighborhood. The house is in a cul-de-sac, so there is not a lot of traffic on this road at all. Usually, the only people that ever come into the cul-de-sac are the mailmen and the people who lived in the other 3 houses that were in the cul-de-sac. The street itself was not very long at all, so there were only 3 houses on each side of the street and they weren't in the cul-de-sac. Essentially, despite being in a large neighborhood, the street that this house was situated in was very quiet, and if you don't live in the neighborhood, you might not even know that this street existed. It was a full Friday night, I'm pretty sure it was late November, right after Thanksgiving, and I arrived at the house around 6 PM. The kids were already sitting down eating dinner when I got there, and the parents told me that they'd be expecting to get back home around midnight or so. The parents also made a joke about how the kids had the whole street to themselves, since the other families that lived there were out of town for Thanksgiving. The parents left, the kids finished eating, and we went outside to play in the cul-de-sac. I remember locking the front door and taking the house key outside with me. The kids rode around on their scooters for about an hour. For some reason, I just felt really on edge while the kids were playing outside. I chalked this feeling up to knowing the fact that we were the only ones on the street since everyone else was out of town. After the kids finished playing outside, we went inside to play Wii in the basement. I remember locking the front door once we were inside and putting the key on the kitchen counter. I then shut the front door again before I went downstairs to the basement. I was super vigilant about checking the doors because I had watched so many scary movies where the babysitter forgets to lock the door and then some crazy murderer gets into the house and blah blah blah. As the kids are playing in the basement, I get that unsettling feeling again. I didn't feel like we were being watched. It was more like when you know that something is going to happen in a scary movie and you're just anticipating it on the edge of your seat. The feeling sticks with me the entire time that we were in the basement, but again, I chalked it up to knowing that the entire street was empty. The clock strikes 10 and it's time for the kids to head to bed. We go to the top floor of the house where the kids' bedrooms are. The house is set up so that when you open the front door of the house and come inside, you're standing in the foyer with the stairs to go to the top floor directly in front of you. If you're standing in the foyer, you can see all the way up the stairs into the bathroom on the top floor. So, the kids are in the bathroom brushing their teeth, and we all hear a car pull in their driveway. I figure that it's their parents coming home super early, so I expect to hear the garage door start to open. But that sound never comes. I walk into the girl's bedroom and look out of her front window. There's a car running in the driveway, and there's a man in the car. But the headlights are turned off, despite it being 10 PM and pitch black dark outside. I figured it was someone who just got lost in our neighborhood and was just using the driveway to stop and get their bearings before heading back out on the road. I leave the girl's bedroom and head back into the bathroom where the kids are. Suddenly, I hear a knock on the front door. I turn around, and there's a man standing at their door holding a pizza box. There are 2 long windows on either side of their front door, so I have a clear view of this guy, and I know that he has a clear view of us. I immediately get that eerie feeling that I had been feeling all night. I asked both of the kids if they ordered a pizza for some reason, and they both said no. These kids were always very honest and wouldn't lie about something like that, or even order a pizza without asking me, so I knew they were being very truthful. Normally, I would have gone downstairs to see what this guy wanted. Maybe he had the wrong house and I could point him in the right direction. But that little voice in my head was screaming, "Do not go downstairs. Do not open the damn door." The guy also didn't look like he worked for any pizza company. Normally, they would be wearing a uniform or a hat with the company's logo on it, or something. This guy just seemed off. He looked like he was in his late 30s or early 40s and looked super disheveled. His shirt was really wrinkled, his pants were filthy and ripped, and he had this ratty black baseball cap that was pulled down super far so that his eyes were covered. He was also grinning really aggressively, like I thought this guy's teeth would just shatter because of how hard he was pressing them together. At this point, the kids notice him and start asking why he's here, should we open the door, etc. I tell them no and ask that they should just go back into their rooms and lie down. The boy goes to his room and I walk the girl into her room and look out of her window at the car again. I notice that the car doesn't have one of those pizza delivery car signs on top, which all of the pizza companies in my town required delivery drivers to have. So now I really feel confident in my initial intuition that this guy isn't a legit pizza delivery guy. The girl gets in bed and I come back out of her room and sit down at the top of the stairs so that I can keep an eye on this guy. I try to stay really calm so as to not to upset the kids, even though I was flipping out on the inside. He's still standing at the door holding the pizza box in one hand and he's still grinning that teeth-shattering grin. His mouth almost looks too big for his face. Even though I can't see his eyes because of the hat, I know that he's dead-ass staring at me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he starts jiggling the door handle pretty aggressively, while still grinning. I silently thank God that I was so psychotic about making sure the front door was locked. He stops jiggling the handle and resumes staring at me. If I was in this situation now, I probably would have called the police immediately, but being only 14 and fairly new to babysitting, I was paralyzed with fear. I felt like if I took my eyes off of him for a second, when I looked back, he would be standing at the base of the stairs. After about another 5 minutes of the stare down, he literally starts walking backwards off of their porch without breaking eye contact. Legit, this guy is walking backwards towards his car while still staring at me. I go into the parents' bedroom, which also has a view of the driveway, kneel down in front of the window and peek out. I'm expecting to see this guy getting into his car. Nope. This guy is nowhere in sight, but the car is still there, so I return to my perch at the top of the stairs, half expecting him to see at the door again, or worse, standing at the bottom of the stairs. But he was nowhere to be seen. After about 20 minutes, I hear a car starting. I quickly run back to the parents' room, kneel in front of the window again, and notice that the car in the driveway has started, and the guy is sitting in the driver's seat, still fucking grinning. He also doesn't turn the headlights on. He shifts into reverse and begins slowly backing out of the driveway, grinning the entire time. Right before he drove off, he turns his head and I swear to God makes direct eye contact with me. Again, I can't see his eyes because of the hat, but I know that he was looking at me. This is really disturbing to me since he didn't really know where I was in the house. The parents' window is the furthest window to the right if you're looking at the house from outside. The lights in the parents' bedroom are off and I'm kneeling down, so really the only part of me that might potentially be visible is the top of my head, my eyes and my nose. But it's also pitch black outside. He doesn't have his headlights on and it's pitch black in the parents' bedroom, so I doubt that I was really visible. He also didn't spend time scanning the windows. His head literally snapped to where I was. It's as if he sensed where I was and then looks at me. After I had time to calm down and collect myself, I started replaying what just happened in my head and came to 3 conclusions. 1. This guy was not a pizza delivery guy. He had no uniform, looked and acted like he was possessed or something, and his car was unmarked. 2. Those 20 minutes or so that elapsed between when he walked backwards off of the front porch to when he got into the car were probably spent walking around the house and checking all of the doors, trying to gain entry. 3. He had malicious intent. Maybe he wanted to rob the house. Maybe he wanted to do something more sinister to me or the kids. Either way, this guy was bad news, and I'm glad that I trusted the voice in my head. I think he probably found the pizza box and tried to pose as a pizza deliverer guy to get me to open the door for him so that he would strike. There are still some parts of the story that are confusing to me. If he really wanted to get inside the house, why didn't he find a rock, a brick, etc. and throw it through a window? I mean, I'm very glad that he didn't, but I just thought it was a bit odd that he checked the doorknobs and then gave up after he discovered that they were all locked. Maybe he felt like doing something that made a lot of noise would alert me, and so he was trying to sneak in a more subtle way to catch me off guard. Why did he walk backwards off the porch? Was it just to preserve eye contact and thus intimidate me? Or was this dude just insane? Why did I feel so unsettled earlier in the evening, before the guy even showed up? Was he watching the house and waiting for the kids to go to bed and for me to be off guard before trying to get into the house? How did he know where to look when he was backing out of the driveway? Why was he grinning the entire time? Did he know that our house was the only house on the street that was inhabited at the time? And why did he pick that house, especially given the fact that it's on a very quiet and secluded street, and he'd have to drive pretty far back in the neighborhood to even reach the street? He could have picked the 50 or so other houses that you would have to pass to even get to this house. The town where I live is upper middle class and has a super low crime rate, and drugs aren't really an issue. We're also surrounded by other similar upper middle class areas, so I'm doubtful that this person was on drugs or some crazy vagrant. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe this dude was just jacked up on drugs. Maybe he was just a vagrant dude. Maybe he really was just a lost pizza delivery man with some unsettling personal quirks. But I'm really doubtful. Whatever he was, I'm glad that I haven't seen him since, that he never returned to that family's house, and that I had enough sense to triple check the front door being locked and listen to the voice in my head. Trust your gut, people.
Number 2.
Let me start this story by saying this happened almost 3 years ago, when I was still pregnant of my first child and was living with my sister, since I had just gotten married and my mother's house had no space for another 2 members. Also, I apologize for not being very clear on details. I'm trying my best, but it happened quite a while ago, so bear with me. I mostly stayed at home, with the occasional trips to the national park or casual strolls around the neighborhood. My husband stayed home until 6 PM and then would be off to work. It wasn't the ideal post-marriage scenario I had in my dreams, but it did the job. I can't remember if it was late or not, but one night I was home alone, watching TV. My husband was at work and my sister was at the supermarket, and it was all quiet until I noticed our water dispenser's bottle was almost empty, so I called the delivery service. I went back to watching TV, and after a few minutes, I heard the doorbell being ringed. I was relieved since I was dying of thirst at that point, so I made my way to the front door and noticed 2 things that raised some huge red flags for me. First, I could hear what clearly was a car engine, and I knew water bottles were delivered in a motorcycle with a small cart attached to its back. Second, I could hear someone on the phone saying something along the lines of, "We're here," or something. Now, my sister's house by no means was on a dangerous part of town, but it wasn't exactly the most peaceful neighborhood either. Burglaries were not really unheard of, and there have been murders, although many were the results of heated discussions between drug addicts. Back to the story. I thought I was maybe overthinking the whole situation. Maybe it was some of my friends coming to visit me. I quickly scratched this theory when I asked, "Who is it?" And a raspy voice said,
"Water guy."
Not taking any chances, I slowly made my way back out the living room and slowly closed the door. They didn't ring the doorbell, nor called me, but I still could hear the car engine and their shadows from below the door. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard the car doors opening and closing multiple times, which could mean that there were more than one guy, and then the car driving off. I was still freaked out, but relieved that they were gone, whatever their intentions were. Not long after this, the water delivery guy arrived and I asked if he had sent someone earlier, which he denied. My heart sank as I stood there while he delivered the water bottles, trying to find an explanation. Thankfully, nothing else happened, but some weeks later, I saw on the local newspaper that a group of criminals were arrested for attempted break-ins. Apparently, their MO was passing off sanitary maintenance workers or other random services, and then forcefully entering the house after the owner opened the door. What scares me the most, however, was the fact that they knew I asked for water delivery. Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe they were spying on me as I made the call, which isn't unlikely since I talk pretty loudly on the phone. Either way, I'm glad I picked up on the red flags and went back to the living room.
Number 3.
My younger sibling has a couple of medical conditions requiring supplies, and my hometown has a pharmacy with a delivery service. We often got deliveries from them. When I was in middle school, my mum got a different job, which meant that I would get home about 2 hours before everyone else, and I'd be in the house by myself. A few weeks after the start of school, right after I got home, a guy rang the doorbell and said that he was from the pharmacy. He had the uniform shirt on and was holding a small bag with their logo on it. I started to unlock the door and went as far as to take the deadbolt and the top lock off, when I happened to think about the fact that the guy had sunglasses and a hat on, and jeans underneath the uniform shirt, whereas most of their drivers were very professional looking. I looked down at the street and saw that there wasn't one of those delivery cars anywhere. Plus, the bag he had was very small, and the deliveries we usually got were a lot bigger. I told him to wait a minute and called my mum to ask if we were expecting a small delivery. She told me that we weren't expecting any delivery and to tell the guy that he must have the wrong address. I went back to the door and told him through the closed door that I thought he had the wrong address, and he started insisting it was the right one, and he knew our last name. I asked him which person the medicine was for, and he didn't know. I told him that we would just pick up the medicine at the pharmacy, and he started to get mad and say that it didn't make any sense and that
Your parents are going to be mad at you if they don't get this delivery.
At this point, I was getting scared because he wasn't leaving. Right after he said that, my uncle, who lived nearby, was coming up our stairs to pick up something. When the guy turned around and saw him, he went down the stairs and said,
Wrong house.
to my uncle and jumped in his car and sped away. My mum called the pharmacy when she got home, and they didn't have any drivers who matched the guy's description or any deliveries scheduled for us, and the pharmacy manager was really disturbed because she said that one of their workers had his work shirt stolen out of his gym locker a few weeks ago. I completely refused to be at home by myself for months after that, and it still creeps me out to think how close I was to opening the door, and the fact that the guy knew our last name.
Number 4.
I lived in a city in central Ohio that begins with a C and has a big college that I lived nearby. I attended a different college than the one that I mentioned and made the 20-minute drive from the city to the college. I also worked nights as a pizza delivery man in the city and the surrounding suburbs. One night, I had an order in the town where my college is located, which is a smaller suburban city northwest of my home city. Now, this call occurred during what my co-workers and I refer to as the dead hour, which is just before the shop closed at 1 in the morning. I begrudgingly took the pizza, got in the car, and plugged the address into the GPS. I noticed that the house was located off on a back road in what looked like a sparsely populated area. Not thinking much of this, I drove to Route 315 to I-270 east and exited. After passing through downtown, the cemetery, and the college, I drove through some sub-developments and then onto the smaller road where the house was located. The GPS notified me that I had arrived at my destination, but to my surprise, the house was boarded up. I noticed that there was a smaller shed in the back of the house that had a small window. There was a flickering light in the window as well. At this point, almost every red flag had gone off in my head, but I knew that my hard-ass boss would be pissed off if I wimped out of this delivery. So, I proceeded towards the shed. As I got closer to the shed, I heard a rustling in the bushes next to the driveway. Then I heard a man whisper, "Here they come, Billy, 45, 45. At that point, a man jumped out of the bushes and 2 other men jumped out of the shed too. They were carrying knives and were wearing those long robes and white masks. I made it back to the car just in time, but one of the assailants managed to slip my arm. As I escaped, I could see the assailants standing in the middle of the road, looking pissed. I probably drove 90 miles per hour on the way back. When I got to the shop, everyone looked shocked. After explaining everything to them, we contacted the police and they dispatched a few officers to the house. When they got there, the assailants were gone and the place was empty. All they found was some drug paraphernalia in the shed and some ropes and weird torture equipment.
Hey guys, it's that Grim Raider here. So, thank you very much for listening through that. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Come on, you've got to subscribe. I mean, you might as well just slap a like, just throw in a comment here and there, you know, just because you can, really. I mean, nothing's stopping you from doing it, right? Nah, but seriously, thank you very much for listening through. If you want to listen to more stories like this, on the screen you can click on either video, that's the 2 previous videos, or you can go in the description and there's also a link to the previous video. There's also a playlist link which will lead you to a lot of videos very similar to this with hundreds of awesome stories like these. So yeah, with that I leave you with thank you very much, and you'll hear from me very soon.